Hello and welcome guys, I've finally done a video to do with my design diagrams actually, so finally we're moving on, we're going forwards and I've put together this little presentation, so I'm going to go through, I've just put my hand in the way of the back since I'm floating hands, anyway, I'll try not to do that. Yeah, so we're moving on with I've finally done most if not all of my UML diagrams. I still haven't finished my class diagram, but I've pretty much done everything else. So we're going to go through those today and see what I've been up to and where we're going to go forward from here. So just to give you an idea of what I'm actually going to be talking about today. So I've done my use case, well, I'd say diagrams, but I've done some use cases as well. So I started out with some use cases. Then, this is in no particular order, so it's, I did some use cases, my navigation diagram, I did also a few sequence diagrams, a deployment diagram as well. We'll go through all of these, if you don't know already, we'll go through what those actually do and what they tell us and how they can help with design decisions and things like that. So, and also obviously the basic one is the class diagram is the main ones. So, which is still unfinished, unfortunately. I've got the classes set out and how they kind of link to each other, but I just need to kind of add methods, variables, things like that. So let's go on to the let's go on to the use cases that I've been doing. So I've basically covered most aspects of simple game navigation from the user's perspective. So I've done things to do with the quick match, the posting to the leaderboard, so posting scores after doing a challenge or something like that. I've done changing options, so so changing things like the sound levels, custom match, so you can set your own variables like the stage. Obviously the stage and character are basic, but things like how many CPU opponents, kind of like music, what soundtrack you want, maybe possibly things like that. So, and obviously multiplayer matches, which is also linked in with the posting to leaderboard because it has to connect to the server, obviously. But we'll go through all of those in a moment's time. So to start off, the first case that I did was to play a quick match against the computer on the space stage. So, which is possibly one of the stages I might be using, but it's not all confirmed yet. But I just used it as an actual example. So, in all cases, you obviously have to start the application. So. You have to, so start up the application in all cases, and then select play game from the pre-menu screen. These are all ones common between all of these cases that we're going through. So those are going to be two main steps to start the application. Obviously on your phone, then select play game when it comes up with a little intro and things. So obviously once we go to quick match. From the menu, because we're playing quick match against computer. So, and then you want to, it doesn't matter what character, that's kind of a modifiable variable. So any character that you want to play as, you can just select from the screen. Then obviously you need to select the space stage from the choice of stage selection. Then we need to just select play match to advance the actual game. Then obviously play the match against the computer. So that's one simple case. The second one was to post a score leaderboard in challenge mode. So it's going to be a bit more simple in how easy it is to actually do, but in terms of actual implementation, it's obviously going to be a lot more difficult than before. But as before, start the application, select play game from the pre-menu screen. Then obviously you want to go to challenge mode. Then you want to select any challenge from the choices of different challenges available. So I'm probably going to have just a few challenges to start with when release probably, but things like I don't know, like time-based things. So defeat this opponent in say 2 minutes or something like that, or score a certain amount of points in this to pass the challenge or things like that. Again, character doesn't really matter too much, and then just select start challenge, then play and complete the challenge if you can, and then after that. The challenge is completed, then hopefully you'll go to a screen where you go and submit your score from the menu and submit that to the leaderboard, and then you can see how everyone else has done. So on to case 3. This is a very simple one actually, it's because it's only changing the sound levels anyway. So you just have to start the application obviously as before, play game, then go to options screen, then drag the volume slider across to whatever volume you want, 40%, 50%, whatever you want, then obviously just save the settings, and that's just another case that the user might take to change those sound levels and other options. So moving on to case 4, it's going to be playing custom match against 3 CPU opponents on the castle stage, which is another, I don't know whether it's going to be a stage. They're probably going to have different names, more interesting names than just kind of environment like space jungle. It's a bit boring, so we'll give them some actual, get a bit sweaty. We'll also give them better names, but as before, start the application, play game, then also obviously we want to choose custom match from the menu, then we want to, again as before, choose any character, and then select the castle stage from the choice of stage selection. Now because it's a custom game, we've got a few more variables to actually, what we can actually put in, so we can choose the amount of CPU opponents, so obviously from here we want to choose 3, which is going to be the maximum, so 4 players on the stage at any one point, otherwise it gets a bit too over the top. Like, it's just if you kind of imagine Super Smash Bros. With 8 players on the screen, it's a bit too much. So 4's a decent limit, 4's a good number, anything between 2 and 4. Then choose your individual difficulty levels, so you can set some to a couple to easy, maybe, and 1 to hard if you really want to do that, or you can put them all on medium difficulty, so they've all got exactly the same difficulties, which probably makes a lot more sense, but obviously it depends what people want to do. So then just select play match as before, then play the match against computer players. So the final case is going to be hosting a multiplayer match against another human opponent. This is probably going to be the hardest aspect of the game, will be making it online. Is probably going to be, I don't have much experience myself in anything to do with online. I've done a couple of things in Java, but not actually in Objective-C, so it's going to be a bit more interesting. But obviously, I'm sure there's plenty of resources that I can find. There's books I'm hopefully going to be reading into and hopefully learning about this as I go. So it's going to be interesting to see how it turns out, but I'm definitely determined and hopefully we can do something. But anyway, going back to the case here, so we're just going to have to start up the application as before, play a game. These are all fairly self-explanatory, but it just gives a better idea. If you get it down on paper, it's a bit better. So kind of, if I do forget about it or think, right, how am I going to do this, blah, 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 I've just got it written down so I can just use it as a reference for other diagrams, so it's very handy. But then we select online multiplayer, then just select create match from the multiplayer menu, then select as a character as before from the default characters, because since it's online we don't want any modifiable characters, so we're just going to have the default set of characters with no modifications to statistics or anything like that. So that's one main thing. You don't want anyone to have an advantage over anyone else in terms of the mechanics themselves. Skill, possibly. Obviously people are going to be better than others. That's where you want the divide. You don't want people to have an advantage because they've got a stronger character than you. You want them to be better than you because they've obviously got more skill. You don't unfair advantages or unfair disadvantages for that matter. So you want to make sure that it's as fair as possible so everyone's got the best chance. So that's why it'd be better if you can use default characters with no modifications at all. So then obviously you have to wait for someone to join if they do, depending on the time or obviously how popular it's going to be, I don't know. So whether that will work, but you just wait for someone to join the room. This is obviously all theoretical, so this is way before implementation, so obviously things possibly might change along the way, but hopefully they stick something like this that we've got here. So then we just then afterwards you'll get a choice of 2 stages to pick from. So there's no kind of, so the host just can't choose every time. It's kind of a random selection of stages, so you kind of get a bit more variety there. So you just vote for one of the stages between all the players. Then obviously the one that gets voted for most is the one to play from. So if there's only 2 players, and if 2 players vote for one stage, and that'll be played. If it's split between 1 and 1, then what it'll do is it'll disregard those 2 stages and pick another random stage from the ones that we've got left, just to kind of make it a bit more interesting. But after, you just want to select that you're ready, just to make sure, so the host just can't start the game without the other person not ready. You have to make sure that you're both checked for ready, then just wait for the timer to go down to 0, there'll be a little countdown, and then you go on to playing the game. So And now moving on to the next diagram is the navigation diagram. I haven't cut it off there. No, that's fine. I thought the camera in the corner there had messed it up, but that's fine. But yeah, this the navigation diagram is just to show the, if I can put this right, trying to put in the easiest way possible. It's just to show the different possibilities that that the user and the customer can take to carrying out certain tasks. So they can, or the different routes that people take. It's like kind of saying, if you, I don't know, if you're going from, I don't know, London to Brighton, then you could go up the I'm from Brighton, I should know, like up the A23 or whatever, and then up the M42 or whatever the road is, or you can go kind of round, you can take different routes, so it's kind of to get to the same destination. So it's kind of that in that sense. That's a really bad analogy, but we'll move on anyway. But yeah, it's just to show what the different possibilities of routes that users can take when they're playing the game. So they can go to start the quick match, and they can go to a custom match, and that will lead to other things. And then going to multiplayer game, that will lead to different possibilities. And going to the options, obviously, will give you different possibilities of selections or choices or modifications to the game. It just gives you different things like that. So yeah, so obviously we'll start with the options anyway, but obviously if you go to modify the option, well, obviously before you've got to start the application, that's all generic. Then going to the main menu, that's all generic, and that's where it kind of splits off. So if you go to modify the options, obviously you've got different choices. You might have ones to edit the volume levels, you might have like music volume, sound effects volume, possibly different sharing options, kind of going to tweet people about it, or give you links to Facebook pages or YouTube pages or things like that, all in the options screen. So it's all the different options that the user can take, and then it's a double-ended arrow because obviously you can go back from the options directly. So it's just different routes to take. So and obviously the main game ones are for the quick match, custom matches, and multiplayer games. So if we start with the quick match, so on quick match you're only going to be given two options. You can pick a character and you can pick a stage. You can't, it will give you like a default number of CPU opponents, so, and it'll give the default difficulties. You can, or random things. They'll obviously be sorted out later what the actual variables actually are, whether you can just go in and select a random difficulty or select like easy, and it will do it all for you. But and then obviously from there you can just start the game because there's not that many variables to carry out. But if you go to custom match, and obviously there's a lot more things that you can actually modify in there. So the arrow goes across there because you can pick the character, and that's generic within the quick match and the custom matches themselves. So you can start up a custom match, then obviously you still want to pick a character and you want to pick a stage, but you can obviously pick different options. So there might be different game modes, like a time attack or a score attack mode. So you choose which mode you actually want for that one, and from there you can that'll lead to different possibilities. So if you pick time attack mode, then obviously you want to set the time limit, and you want to set the time limit, like say 2 minutes or something like that. If you pick the score attack, then you want to pick a score limit, something like, I don't know, 20,000 points. So they lead to different possibilities because you've made a different choice. So, and then they all kind of they all link back in again. So obviously you want to, after that you want to pick the CPU, how many like the CPU difficulty, and how many opponents you want and who. Like you can customly pick. Customly? Is that a word? Don't think so. You can pick custom characters. So, well, not pick custom characters. You can custom pick characters. So you can pick whatever characters you want. Kind of, they're actually within the game. It doesn't do it randomly. You can actually pick specifically who you want to fight against, just for a bit more variety. And obviously from there, you just want to start the game. So, and obviously the last main option is going to be the multiplayer game. So, if you go into the multiplayer game, then you can actually you actually want to choose whether you want to host a game or whether you want to join a game. So if you just join a room that's already made, then you just need to go through. Nothing needs to be changed for you because the host is making the settings for you. So you skip all of that. So you just go in and you want to just vote on the stage to play on, and you just pick your character because everything's all done for you. But if you host the room, then you want to choose the arenas, kind of on all the game settings within that. So like time limit, maybe score limit, things like that. Depending on how you want to do it, then obviously you still want to, and then after that, you get people to join your room, and then you just vote on the stage, vote on your character, and then go to start the game. So, anyway, going on to the next diagram. I'm taking a bit long here, but that's fine. I'm in no rush. The next thing is set diagrams as sequence diagrams. These are kind of the ones I would say find actually quite helpful, along with the class diagrams and the navigation diagrams. They're actually pretty helpful. But yeah, sequence diagrams are still, even though they're following on from the use cases, they're still quite helpful to draw up and do, just to give you an idea, maybe start getting ideas of what methods and methods you want to call, and what variables you want to change along the way. So that's where you start filling in those sections. So I've done sequence diagrams for the quick match, the multiplayer match, and changing options. There's only 3 there. You don't really need to repeat all of the use cases, you just want to kind of cover the main points there. So, sorry, let's go on to the next one. So the first one that I did was the quick match. So, as I said before, the sequence diagrams are just following on from the use cases. So, I'll go through this first diagram here to kind of give you an idea of what they're actually about if you don't know what they are already. But and then afterwards I'll just go through them a bit quicker. But so here we go. We're doing a sequence diagram for playing quick match on the space stage. So we've got the user on the left here, and they can carry out. On the left you've got the user. So every time the user carries out an action, the arrow goes from the user bar across to the relevant class. Well, the ones at the top are the class names at the moment, or potential class names. So, and how they interact with those classes. So, the user wants to start. If you start the application, then you're going to be then the GUI is going. Well, you're going to change state to GUI because you've started up game, and then you go into the GUI. So, the arrow goes across to the GUI class, and then comes back and changes the state to the main menu or whatever. Well, it'll probably be the main menu, and then it gives the what's the word? It gives it back to the user, so the user can now carry out another command. So from here, they'll want to select quick match, and then that will interact with the quick match class to change the state to go to the quick match screen. So from there, it goes to quick match, as I said, and then it'll be interacting with the quick match class. So it goes right across to the quick match class instead. So and then obviously the state will change. So as before, we were saying there are 2 options that you could take. The character, you can choose your character, and you can choose what stage you're going to play on. So the user can now, because they've gone into the quick match, they can now select a character, and then we can kind of store that in a variable. I don't usually do this, but more for both the purposes of this video and for me, I've just kind of just given that variable name. So select a character, let's call it variable C, and then that interacts with the quick match, which calls a method, which will either call a method or set a variable to a certain value. So in this case, it is actually setting a variable to a certain value. So the chosen character will equal this variable C. So which would probably be better off calling it. It could be a string, or in this case, it'll probably be a string, but it could be a string, integer, decimal, anything like that. Variables. I'm trying to remember what variables. Yeah, those are kind of main ones. Integers, decimals, floats, whatever floats your boat. Yeah, sorry, bad pun. I should be killed for that. Yeah, so just setting the variable here, variable C, which is holding what the character is, and then it's setting the chosen character variable to C. So the quick match class will now know what character you've chosen. Now it's being handed back to the user to carry out the next kind of event or command. So now you need to choose the space stage. So we'll store that choice and say variable S, and then that will set the chosen stage variable. This is just kind of pseudo names, things like that, but set the chosen stage name to S. So now the quick match class now knows that the chosen character we want is this variable C, and it knows, well, it could be a random character. In this case, it's a random character, but And it also knows that we want to pick the space stage, which is stored in variable s, which has been given to chosen stage variable, and set it as that. So now possession is handed back to the user, so they can carry out another command, and obviously from here you just want to proceed to the game because you've carried out everything you want to, so you just want to start the game. So now it's interacting with the main game class, which is going to be like handling for all of the actual in-game mechanics and things like that. So it passes over to the main game, which changes the states of the main game, and it goes into the game. And I've used game quite a lot of time there, but it's the best way that I can try and explain it. But yeah, that's kind of, hopefully that kind of explained it a little bit. I might have been a bit vague or a bit too complex, I don't know, but hopefully that did help a little bit if you didn't know what they were about before. So now we're moving on to one for, this is a multiplayer match one, so this is a lot more complicated because of the different options that you've got, and obviously the multiplayer element. So we've got our 4 classes here, the kind of pseudo classes for the for this video in particular. So we've got a GUI class, which we're probably going to keep, multiplayer match class, networking, and main game. So networking and multiplayer match are new classes here. So a lot of them, these sequence diagrams usually cross over depending on what the actual events are. But networking will obviously handle all of the online elements, and that might have certain subclasses like a leaderboard class, I think, and things like that, and possibly other classes, subclasses of that. But this is the main class that we're just going to use for the moment, and the multiplayer match class because we're obviously doing a multiplayer match. So obviously, as before, the user runs the game, so run bit battle, then then the GUI class will change the state, so now we're at the GUI, or the main game state, or the main menu state, depending on what you want to call it. And now the user will select an online multiplayer match, because obviously we're doing a multiplayer match this time around, excuse me. Obviously you change the state now to multiplayer match to let the game know that you want to play multiplayer match. So now we want to, because we're doing a multiplayer match against a human opponent, we want to set one up rather than actually join one. So we want to create game, which we'll call a new method, which we're calling create new match. And because you can create different matches depending on quick matches or custom matches, things like that, so we're having one generic method, create new match, which can take a string variable here in this case, and we're going to call it multiplayer, so it'll know that you want to create a new multiplayer match. And now we're going to select a character as before, call that variable C as we did before, and assign that to the chosen character variable as we did before. And then it goes back to the user, so now we wait for a human opponent to join the room. And then what I've done here, that moves on to the networking class. What I've done here, I've done a little loop here where the player is waiting for a player to join the room. So you're going to be going around this loop just waiting until someone joins. Once someone finally joins, you can break out of that, set waiting to false, and then everything's handing back to the user again. So the user can now carry out a new command after waiting for the opponent to join. Obviously this diagram can't show that as well here, but it's rather more generic in that sense, but it does help, but it's just not as complex as other diagrams that we can use, but that'll be more evident in things like the next diagram. But anyway, so I'm blabbing on a bit here, but so now obviously you want to move up to voting for one of the provided stages. So we're going to be given the choices of 2 different stages, and then we'll assign that to the variable S. So now the networking class knows that the chosen stage is now S, and obviously you can kind of go from there. You can say kind of, is the other human opponent that you're playing over the internet, have they chosen the same stage as you? If they have, then obviously just go forward and use that stage. If they haven't, then obviously you want to choose a new random stage from ones that haven't been chosen already. So, and from there, it goes back to the user to finally kind of select that they're ready. Once that has all been sorted out, select that you're ready, set ready to true, so the networking class now knows that you're ready, waits for the other human opponents to make sure they're ready, and then start playing, and then go straight to the main game from there. So, going on to the final sequence diagram that I've done here is changing the options for the volume settings. So we're not interacting with that many classes this time around. We're only going to be interacting with the GUI class and the options class. So as before, we start up the application, and that changes the state to the GUI or the main menu. And there might be several states within that GUI class, but we're generalizing it here. But yeah, so the user now wants to open the options menu, so now you're going to be interacting with the options class, and that's going to change the state as before. In the other class, like the custom match and the multiplayer, it's going to be like that. And now you want to modify the volume slider, so to set it to a certain volume level. So we're going to call that for variable x. So you might want to set it to 60 out of 100. Like it's probably easy to call it an integer value, so you can just go up in 10. So you can set to 10, 20 to kind of refer to the percentage, kind of 10, 20, 30%, or 70, 80%, depending on how loud or quiet you want it. And that will call a method that we're calling here modify volume, and then you'll insert that x value. So it could be whatever you wanted to call it before. And now it gets passed back to the user to carry out a new command, so they want to save the options or confirm the options perhaps, and that will call the save options method, which stores all the. So before we were probably using temporary variables, and once the user actually wants to save, then we'll store those in the permanent ones for use later on in the game. And now, from the options menu, it takes you back to the menu and changes the state for you. So that's slightly different as before, since it goes right back to the GUI. In the other cases, we didn't go straight back to the GUI because it didn't really apply. But here we're going back to the GUI, and state's being changed back to the GUI. So that was all the sequence diagram. Hopefully that made a bit of sense. Fingers crossed. It did a little bit for me. No, it's... Oh, so I'm moving my filter around here, but I've just bodged it. Hold on a second, sorry. There we go. Yeah, so the second to last diagram that we're doing here is a deployment diagram. This is, if you haven't seen one of these before, this is for showing how the game will be deployed on the system. So how it will be accessed by the user, how in what directories and what locations the application will be stored, and how it can be accessed by the user themselves. So obviously I want to release this game for the iPhone, so the user or customer is going to obviously require an iPhone with the App Store, the Apple App Store on their iPhone, and they'll most likely need the most updated version of iOS. So in the case of this video, it's 5.1.1 is going to be the most recent iOS version. So they're obviously going to need those two elements on their iPhone, and sorry, I'm going on a bit there. So they'll need to connect to the App Store, or the Apple App Store server, or whatever they want to call it, via obviously you need an internet connection. So here we've got a device which is a router, which obviously has routing protocols, which has a routing table, things like that. We won't go into detail there, but and you want to connect to the iPhone store via this wireless connection, so you need a router to connect to that. So we're talking about the hardware here, so this is all the hardware that's required on both ends, not just the customer's end, but on the corporate end as well, like the company's end. So Apple need servers to store, to keep the App Store running and to store your app. They'll need a storage, so most likely it'll be a server. So you'll connect to that App Store server via HTTP, most likely. So yeah, so you've getting mixed up with the words here. So the server will have a link to an artifact on that. We're calling it an artifact in terms of this diagram, because that's kind of what they call kind of artifacts. So anything that's either physical or anything that's kind of electronic, as kind of most of the time called an artifact. So that'll be a page on the App Store server, which will be a link to my application on the App Store, which is what the user or customer can connect to. So, and that possibly they might have another file server. Apple might have a file server, so which actually holds my, or it's a .ipa file is the file format, but they might have another separate server. I'm not entirely sure, but they might have another server that has my application on it, which the App Store server needs to fetch that from the file server in order for the user to download my app. So this is just a diagram to kind of show the. I didn't explain it very well, I apologise, but it's just a diagram to show how the where the location of my app is and how the customer accesses that, and kind of all of the hardware that's involved in this process. So obviously you need a router to connect to the internet, you'll need the iPhone in order to connect to the App Store, which connects to the file server, and how they all kind of link together, and what techniques they use to connect to each other. So that's kind of just what it's showing there. It's fairly simple when explained properly. Unfortunately not from me, but yes, going on to the final diagram. This is very early in development. It's just my class diagram that I've done. It's not really, as you can see, it's not really finished. It's just my classes that I'm possibly going to be having. So we'll go through this very quickly. It's not completely done. Possibly in maybe a week or two, I'll go through it properly. I'll have a full diagram going, but we'll see what happens. But yeah, I've called this version 0.1 because it's pretty much very early stages. But so we've got a GUI class, which is kind of the center for all the GUI, obviously. So from there, the options are going to link to that. So if the user goes to the options menu, then obviously you want to be changing the settings. And from that, we can have things like the statistics and the sound class as well. So statistics class will hold all of the different stats. Perhaps we'll have maybe a screen that holds all the statistics like time played, I don't know, matches won, matches played against human opponents, CPU opponents, things like that, just some extra stats to hold all of those just in case they need to be used. And obviously the sound class is going to hold all of the playing, pausing, stopping, initialization of all the music. Kind of, they'll know when to start, when to stop the music, when to play it, things like that. I've linked the GUI to the 2D engine. That's probably wrong. I might need to change that. But we're going to have a 2D engine class to obviously handle all the graphical elements of both the in-game stuff and stuff during the and graphics through the menus as well. So we'll have a class holding all of that, and that'll probably have several subclasses, perhaps maybe animations, things like that. But and linked to GUI, we're going to have the networking class. So when the user goes to a multiplayer game, it'll have to connect to the networking class, and from there we'll probably have things like leaderboards, maybe a server class, perhaps something like that, something to transfer the data. We'll have classes going on there. So it's yeah. And another main class we're going to have is the main game class. So obviously you can choose different game modes, so you might have quick match, custom matches, multiplayer matches, things like that. So we'll have classes, individual classes for all of those game modes as well, which are subclasses of the main game class. So, and we'll also have a 2D animations class as well to handle all the 2D animations. That should probably be a subclass of the 2D engine, possibly, maybe it have its own class. We'll see about that. But and obviously the characters as well, they're going to have their own class, giving you different statistics, maybe telling you what the name, what type they are, things like that. There's probably a lot of classes. There are a lot of classes missing from this, so there's not really much to talk about here. But very early in development, this class diagram. But we'll definitely come back to that, and hopefully it'll be a lot more extensive. I definitely need to fill out a lot more parameters, fields, variables, methods, things like that. We definitely need those for this. So just to wrap it up quick, things for next week. Most likely next week's vlog will be about the character and level design. I'm planning to start those tomorrow, or not start, we'll carry on. with the character design and start the level design, and just kind of get some ideas jotted down on paper. I've got some graph paper, so obviously because it's pixel based, so it's nice to do on graph paper. It's nice to just have it all outlined, so you can just get some drawings done and things like that. I also realised that I don't think I've really gone through my requirements yet, so I'll finish those up and I'll go through those quickly at the start of the next video log. So, and just going through those requirements that I've set out to kind of show what I want the game to achieve, what I expect of it, and things like that. Yeah, don't forget to check out I've got my website obviously, and my YouTube, which you're obviously watching it from here, unless you might be watching it from somewhere else, but there's my YouTube down here as well, and on the slides, and obviously my Twitter account as well, so check those out to keep up to date with any developments that I've done. Yeah, sorry that was quite a lengthy video there. I don't know how long I've been going on for, but yeah, I was planning it to be a bit longer anyway, so it's gone fairly well, I think. But yeah, make sure you keep up to date. Subscribe if you want to, or comment on these videos if you want to keep up to date with all of my developments. But until next time, I shall speak to you soon. Bye for now.